Welcome back to Live 5 Premiere. An AI drone selects a target. No human authorized it. Who is legally responsible is the question for tonight. Imagine an AI-powered loitering drone. It activates. Its sensors scan. Its algorithm identifies a target. No human issues the command to engage. No human authorizes the strike. The system decides. It fires. Someone is harmed. Tonight's puzzle for each one of you live, and even for the recorded sessions afterwards. Under current international law, who is legally responsible? The algorithm that made the decision? The engineers who designed it? The commanding officer who activated the system? The state that deployed it? Is there an answer? Hold that question. The presentation will reveal, and we will resolve it by the end of it together. Before I go on, I want your verdict in the comments live right now. When an AI weapon, it kills and no human authorized it, who do you hold responsible? The algorithm, the developer, the commander, or the state? Type it. Live chat right now. I'll read your verdicts before I actually give you the legal answer. And yes, I'm also on live chat, so you may also write to me. And I promise you, the law is messier than your instinct. Good evening and welcome to the AI Law Daily. Thursdays until Sundays every week. Live premiere where I am available on live chats. I'm your host, Nupur Mitra, a techno-legal analyst and a lawyer by profession. And this is your live analysis premiere at the intersection of artificial intelligence, international law, and the governance gaps or collisions that neither has yet fully mapped for the other. Over 4 consecutive evenings, we have built a precise architecture on this channel live premiere with you. Live 1 was domestic law mobilized for AI infrastructure, international human rights frameworks responding only by analogy. Live 2, the world's first binding AI treaty, private sector coverage optional, national security activities exempt. Live 3 was the EU AI Act entering full application in the next 14 days, 2nd August 2026. Extraterritorial ambition exceeding enforcement reach. Live 4 was the UN's diagnosis of a global governance deficit, a coordination architecture with no enforcement powers. Tonight, we do not examine a governance gap in the abstract. Tonight, we examine what happens when that gap intersects with a weapons system that is already deployed, already operating in active conflicts, and already making decisions that international law has never designed to handle. The international community has been discussing lethal autonomous weapons systems since 2013. That year, the UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial executions submitted a report raising a central question: whether it is not inherently wrong to let autonomous machines decide who and when to engage. He recommended moratoriums on development and deployment while the issue was examined. In 2016, the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, the CCW, established a group of governmental experts to develop a regulatory framework That group has met regularly since 2017. In 2019, it agreed on 11 guiding principles, including the full applicability of international humanitarian law to these systems and the need to retain human responsibility for decisions on their use. 11 principles, not one binding obligation. And while the discussions continued, the systems were not waiting. In March 2020, a United Nations panel of experts reported that in Libya, a loitering munition, the Cargo 2, manufactured in Turkey, was used by forces affiliated with the Libyan government to autonomously engage combatants. The manufacturer contests this finding, but the UN panel's assessment remains on the record. An autonomous system operating without a continuous human data link made targeting decisions in an active conflict. Writing in the Arms Control Today journal in January 2025, Alexander Quent, one of the leading experts on this issue, stated directly, "Early examples in Ukraine and Gaza reveal this shift," meaning the shift toward AI-integrated targeting in active conflict. His conclusion: integrating AI into weaponry will alter fundamentally how conflicts are fought and call into question the role of humans within them. The governance discussions and the battlefield deployments are running on different clocks, and the gap between them is not narrowing. So now let us build the legal architecture with precision on this channel tonight. There is widespread international consensus that existing international humanitarian law, IHL, fully applies to autonomous weapon systems. The CCW group of governmental experts has affirmed this. The International Committee of the Red Cross has affirmed this. The UN General Assembly has also affirmed this. The core principles are clear: distinction, the requirement to distinguish between civilians and combatants; proportionality, the requirement to weigh anticipated civilian harm against concrete military advantage; precaution, the requirement to take all feasible steps to avoid or minimize civilian casualties. These principles apply. They are not suspended because a weapon system is autonomous. Here is the governance gap. These principles were designed around human decision making. They assume a human being who can be held responsible, who can exercise judgment, who can be prosecuted, who can be held to account. When an algorithm makes the targeting decision, the chain of accountability does not follow cleanly. Writing in March 2026, legal scholar Gerald Mako at the Lieber Institute at West Point named this precisely. He described what he called an accountability gap and defined it as, in his words, a critical deficiency in which existing legal frameworks fail to attribute responsibility for infractions committed by autonomous systems. He continued, IHL fundamentally depends on human judgment to guarantee essential principles such as proportionality, thereby facilitating accountability via individual or state liability. LAWS, however, bring layers of complexity with their inscrutable algorithms and unpredictable adaptations, making it highly problematic to prove intent or negligence among developers, military leaders, or deployers. Inscrutable algorithms, unpredictable adaptations, highly problematic to prove intent or negligence. This is the structural condition under which autonomous weapons are currently being deployed. And the forum designed to address this, the CCW, has been structurally blocked for nearly a decade. The CCW operates by consensus. Every member state holds a veto. In December 2021, the CCW Review Conference concluded without consensus on establishing binding controls. The campaign to stop autonomous weapons described the outcome plainly. The CCW had proven itself, in their words, a road to nowhere. The GGE continued, a rolling text, a provisional draft of possible regulatory elements, was compiled by the group's chair in November 2024. It contains formulations on human control and judgment, prohibitions on systems operating without context-appropriate human oversight, and state obligations. Provisional formulations, not binding text, not a treaty. Who is blocking consensus? That's the question now. The autonomousweapons.org database, which tracks all state positions, states directly a few states, most notably the US, Russia, India, Israel, are in opposition to a legally binding treaty. The United States, as documented by Lieber Institute in May 2026, specifically opposes the adoption of fixed standards such as meaningful human control, the central concept around which most proposed regulatory frameworks are built. A concept without a definition, a forum without consensus, systems in the field. Against this impasse, a framework has emerged with growing support. It is called the two-tier approach. Prohibit autonomous weapons systems that cannot be used in accordance with international humanitarian law. Those whose effects cannot be sufficiently predicted, understood, or explained. Regulate all other systems requiring defined levels of human control and judgment. Writing in the Lawfare Journal in October 2024, legal scholar Charlie Trumbull analyzed what a legally binding instrument might look like. He identified three possible approaches: outright prohibition of a category of autonomous weapon, a positive obligation requiring meaningful human control, or mandatory due diligence and procedural requirements prior to deployment. His assessment: the prohibition approach faces an obstacle most disarmament treaties have not encountered. There is, as of today, no agreed definition of autonomous weapons systems under international law. You cannot prohibit a category you cannot define. The due diligence approach, requiring states to conduct legal reviews and establish procedures before deploying autonomous systems, presents what Trumbull describes as a meaningful path forward. Not because it is ambitious, because it is achievable. Over 100 countries regard a new treaty with prohibitions and restrictions as, in Human Rights Watch's documented language, a necessary, urgent, and achievable. The UN Secretary General called for the conclusion of a legally binding instrument by July 2026. Now, before I resolve this, I need your position on the record. Should there be a binding international treaty banning weapons that kill without meaningful human control? Comment 1 for yes, ban them. Comment 2 for no, existing law is enough. One word. And know this, the number 166 voted your one last year. Where do you stand? So tonight's puzzle, let's come back to it. An AI-powered drone, it engages without human authorization. Someone is harmed. Under current international law, who is legally responsible? The answer has 3 layers. And mind you, I promise, none of them is clean. First, state responsibility. States remain responsible for ensuring that all weapon systems, including autonomous ones, comply with international humanitarian law. If an autonomous system is deployed and causes harm that violates IHL, state responsibility applies in principle. This is the most established accountability pathway available. Second, individual criminal accountability. For war crimes and crimes against humanity, international criminal law requires proof of intent or negligence by an identifiable human being. Where an algorithm made the targeting decision, attributing that intent to the developer, the commander, the operator who activated the system, is what Mako described as highly problematic. The accountability gap is not a theoretical future risk. It is the present legal condition. Third, there is no instrument specifically designed to answer this question. In December 2024, 166 nations voted in favor of a UN General Assembly resolution calling for action. In November 2025, 156 nations voted again. 2 consecutive overwhelming votes. As of tonight, no legally binding instrument on autonomous weapons system exists. The UN Secretary General's 2026 deadline has already arrived. The systems are deployed. The law has not yet caught up. Tonight's takeaway, it is this. 2 consecutive years of overwhelming UN General Assembly votes. 166 nations in December 2024, 156 in November 2025 demonstrate that the political will exists among the clear majority of the international community. The blockage is not democratic. It is structural. The CCW's consensus model allows a small minority of states to prevent binding regulation the majority supports. As Mint wrote, the contrast between the rapid development of AI-powered weapons and the slow pace of regulatory discussions is stark. There is, however, a structural shift worth noting. In May 2025, for the first time, a meeting on autonomous weapons was convened, not at the CCW in Geneva, but at the UN General Assembly in New York, where 96 countries attended. The General Assembly does not operate by consensus. It operates by majority vote. Now, next in the conversation, Live 6, we will examine the doctrine at the heart of why this gap persists. Why a state consistently objects to an emerging international norm, refuses to sign, refuses to ratify, refuses to be bound, Can it legally exempt itself? The persistent objector doctrine. Let's understand that. 8 o'clock Central, next time, be here. If tonight added precision to how you think, do these 3 things. Subscribe on this channel, the AI Law, Global Security, AI Risks and Liability. And also follow me on my LinkedIn, Substack, Instagram, and definitely be a part of my newsletter, thoughtleadinnovate.com/newsletter. This newsletter is a mailing list. Here, through this, we'll be able to chat more on the topics that concern us here. And then we don't depend on platforms. We don't depend on them to be able to help us, to join us together. So see you next.